Tim Schafer. He's one of the most creative video game designers I know. In my eyes, I see Tim Schafer as the Stanley Kubrick of video games because, like Kubrick, almost everything Schafer does is unappreciated. He has created some of the greatest video games of all time, but for some odd reason, they don't sell well. I really like his cartoony animated feel that he puts in his games and somehow makes something new and creative, which made hardcore fans forever love his games. What also made some of his game designs different than any other is that he made some of the most epic stories as well as humor. In this review, I will be reviewing 3 games by Schafer. I'm dropping off Monkey Island and Maniac Mansion because, though they were designed by him, they weren't actually his games that he wrote. And I haven't played Full Throttle yet, which was actually the first game that he wrote. So let's begin reviewing the first game of this review. 1998. It's probably one of my favorite years in gaming because it had some of the best releases and many of them sparkles my eyes, helping me to remember how great these games were. 1998 had great games like Spyro, Crash, Gex, Metal Gear Solid, Pokemon, Banjo-Kazooie, StarCraft, Quake 2, Half-Life, and the greatest game of all time, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. But when I ask somebody about games in 1998, I haven't met someone that pops open LucasArts' greatest masterpiece, Grim Fandango, because it wasn't that popular. I remember when this game was released. The cover of the box reminded me of Joker from The New Adventures of Batman, and I was very interested. I couldn't play the game because it was rated T, and I didn't get a chance until I was 18 years old when I finally got a chance to remember it. And man, did I miss something. After Full Throttle, LucasArts gave Tim Schafer an opportunity to write and design the company's very first 3D adventure game. This also became Schafer's last game for LucasArts because it became a commercial failure. Only sold over 9,000 copies up to 2003. To this day, not many people ever heard of Grim Fandango. I mean, this is the most underrated game I have ever played. Unlike other LucasArts' adventure games, you are now able to use keyboards to move your character and interact with your environments and other characters, rather than using just a mouse just to make another typical point-and-click adventure. The game does not have levels, but rather an RPG-style open world that's divided into 4 acts, where each act has a new world with a new day of each year of the timeline of the story. There you'll be solving many of those puzzles, and as you go along solving those puzzles, the plot and adventure goes along. You play as Manny Caravera, who once had a career as a Grim Reaper who not only sent people to death, but also helped the dead to find a place of the land of the dead, or a travel agent. He tries to escape from his eternal career. Then later on, he tries to uncover this criminal plot, save his love, and tries to get to this place that everybody's trying to get in the land of the dead. The game setting is an Aztec belief of the afterlife mixed with movie classical Hollywood crime dramas like Casablanca and so much more I haven't seen yet. This is where the game becomes very original. I love every character in this game, and rarely I could find that in a single video game. Each character has very crisp voice acting, dialogue, and personality plus. It's like watching a movie for some odd reason. Speaking of movies, this is probably the only adventure game mixed with comedy drama that actually work. Usually when controls and gameplay isn't that exciting, you must need a fantastic plot to make the game like the greatest ever. A genre like this could only work with movies, but I never thought that it would actually work with a video game. But that's not my favorite part of the game. My favorite part of the game has to be the graphics and the design. Look at it, it's just so beautiful. Most reviewers that review the game often say that the graphics and the design is like Final Fantasy VII. To me, it's like a painting, which made the game look like an animated masterpiece. This shows how artistic Tim Schafer actually is. My favorite part in the entire game has to be Act 2, where Manny and his speed demon friend Gladys owns a nightclub all to themselves. This area, not level, is in my opinion what really shines the game with its classical movie look mixed with jazz music. I mean, this is the only game, despite Marvel vs. Capcom 2, that has jazz music. And plus, the soundtrack of the game is one of the greatest soundtracks in the video game. Just exploring through Act 2 just gives me this warm, dark feeling that I'm as if I'm exploring paradise. If there was an area of a game that I would like to see come to life, it has to be this one. The only downside of this game is that the gameplay is not that exciting, but with that in the game, you must depend on the plot to make this one of the greatest game of all time. And a matter of fact, I kind of like the gameplay because it gives me the chance to explore around the game just to see the artwork that Tim Schafer has created in this game. This isn't a game for gamers who expect action. children, but rather an audience who love epic stories in a video game. I'm in that crowd, so my score for this underrated masterpiece is a 5 fingers out of 5. If you see this game, I strongly encourage you to buy it because it has a story that is so great that you will never forget. And to this day, for the people who have played it, still live up to this day just to tell us that this is one of the greatest games ever created. Once you play this game, you will know the reason why. After Grim Fandango, Tim Schafer and his Grim Fandango development team who left LucasArts reunited and began a new company called Double Fine Productions and had Majesco as their new publisher. Their next project is a multi-platform game called Psychonauts. Psychonauts is a platformer game where they had better controls and gameplay than Grim Fandango. The setting of the game is at a U.S. government training facility for children's summer camp for sidekicks. You play as Rasputin, or Raz for short, who's trying to get some training in this camp with the kids to fulfill his dream to become a psychonaut. During his stay, the Psychonaut agents were training Raz on how to be a psychonaut. There, Raz learns his new psychic abilities, enter people's mind, and his duty in destroying a person's demons. Later on in the story, an antagonizing dentist starts taking every camp member's brains. There, Raz tries to prove himself worthy enough to become a psychonaut and saving the day. You might think that the story of the game is kinda cheesy, but in a way, it's a hilarious game, and later it becomes more epic as you go along. There are a lot to cover in this game, and a lot to collect. Rather than just collecting coins and random crap that has no purpose at all, Psychonauts has these collectibles called figments where if you collect enough of them, you gain a level, and if you reach a certain level, you gain an upgrade or a new ability. You can only find these figments when you're in a person's mind. Inside the person's mind, you'll be facing a lot of challenges, which is both creative and original. Like Grim Fandango, I love all the characters, but you gotta admit that Schafer knows how to make characters with excellent voice acting and dialogue that perfectly fits the story for the game. For those who play the game, you got to admit that Lily really fits as Raz's girlfriend. Anyway, for a last-gen platformer game, the graphics and designs are very excellent. It really does take the influence of Tim Burton's movies like The Nightmare Before Christmas. When you're in a person's mind, which are the levels, it really marks the spot of fitting a character's personality. I love this creative idea because we can see what's in the person's head and what challenges we have to face to cure their insanity, battle their demons, and other problems. Like if you're in Orlandier's mind, the level is in the battlefield. This way we can learn about each character that comes and goes and learn more about the characters who are heavily engaged in the story. Even if you're not in a level, the locations like the map, underwater, and so much more are just breathtaking to watch and explore. But there are a couple of problems in the game. Sometimes a character constantly repeats him or herself in the game, which becomes really annoying, and also there are glitches that pops out of nowhere and which interrupts my gameplay. Many times I had to restart my Xbox and PlayStation 2 just to do it all over again. Also, the load times in the game takes a long time, which also ruins the moment for me. But other than that, the game is probably one of the greatest platformer games I have ever played. I guess the reason why Psychonauts, like Grim Fandango, was a commercial failure because it was confusing on what audience this game was targeting at the time. It felt like a platformer game for all ages, but there were plenty of graphical content that was not suitable for all ages. Also, this was a new game series and people were going nuts over first-person shooters and overhyped games. Majesco faced financial problems which almost caused the end of Double Fine Productions. It's gamers like me that at the time that should have bought this game and missed out on the adventure that this game holds. But years later, the game made more sales when gamers saw reviews and awards given to this game. This grew the popularity of Psychonauts, which made it eligible enough to make it through the Xbox Live Originals. Since I got a chance to play this game, I have to say that I absolutely love this game. This is unlike any other platformer ever released because most typical platformer games just has a forgettable story, but Psychonauts had one of the most epic stories into a genre of games that was not known for. Psychonauts has great gameplay, a lot to collect, a lot of laughs, and so much more. That's why I give this criminally underrated masterpiece, Psychonauts, a 5 fingers out of 5. You might be asking, do you like Psychonauts better than Grim Fandango? For me it's a tie because both games has their ups and downs, but both of them are very much underrated masterpieces. Do yourself a favor and buy this game. Tim Schafer couldn't afford to make another commercial failure of a game, so he needed to make something that would make the next game succeed both financially and critically. He wanted to make a video game that was based on his favorite genre of music, heavy metal. But that wasn't enough because he needed a powerful appeal to get the attention he needs to make his next game successful. When he realized that Jack Black enjoyed playing Psychonauts, he put him as the main part of the game, where Jack plays as the world's greatest roadie, Eddie Riggs, who had a tough life and enter a distant world where heavy metal music is the sound of the gods. Then on Rocktober 2008, Brutal Legends was released and became a success that Tim Schafer has waited for a long time. I got to say that this game was so funny, it made me laugh so hard, as well as an engaging story to follow and an enjoyment to cause mayhem and destruction. This game is like Psychonauts' open world gameplay mixed with real-time strategy elements, which definitely I enjoy. Most people did not like the RTS elements put in the action game like this, but to me, it's like Ratchet & Clank mixed with RPG elements. This game blew my mind, and it's a game that the heavy metal audience long waited for. The graphics and designs for this game are very crisp, mesmerizing, but not realistic because of the cartoony animation. But that's great because the cartoony animated feel is what Tim Schafer is known for. I'm not going to spoil too much because I'm running out of time and it's a new game, but I have to give Brutal Legends a 5 fingers out of 5. I can hardly wait to see what Tim Schafer has to pull next.